first off, we want to talk about one of the fights on UFC 12's fight night main card. Greg Hardy, former NFL defensive player for the Cowboys and Carolina Panthers. He had his struggles early on in his UFC career. I can remember watching him early, and he used his inhaler in between rounds, and that cost him the fight because you can't do that in in the UFC.
What do you mean? I can do that in the NFL. Why can't I do it in the UFC?
Some things you just have to learn the hard way. Greg Hardy definitely learned that one the hard way. So Greg Hardy defeated Maurice Green to become 8-2-0 with one no contest. That no contest being the inhaler, I believe. Right?
Yeah, it was. And then he had the disqualification, which was one of his losses. That was his first UFC fight.
That was his first ever UFC fight. Yeah.
And that was just him. And it's still him not knowing the rules. He's not only new to the UFC, he's new to the sport. And I think with Greg Hardy, we're definitely seeing some major improvements in his game. And I think that Greg Hardy is getting to the point where he's got to be considered one of the top 15 best heavyweights. Or if he's not, if you don't want to put him there, give him a top 15 opponent and make him prove himself. I know he's faced Alexander Volkov. That's his other loss along with the DQ. And that came in a unanimous decision. He went all 3 rounds. He stood in there with Volkov, and Volkov has been lighting it up lately. I think it's time for him to get another shot at a ranked opponent to prove himself. This is a guy that continues to improve and get better, and I think that he really needs to be taken seriously now. He's a big draw, especially for people who are casual fans who don't really know MMA or UFC and just see the name Greg Hardy and they're intrigued. This is a guy who could really bring people into the sport, and I think that the UFC needs to start taking more advantage of that and start giving him better opponents that are going to lead to better fights.
Yeah, for sure. That there's a lot of storylines with Greg Hardy and a lot of negative storylines at that too. So I think Dana White has to balance that. One of which
let's get to it.
Yeah. One of which happened kind of under the radar and didn't get a lot of traction. Now we feel like it's definitely noteworthy. We want to talk about it. So this fight between Greg Hardy and Maurice Green was almost called off about 2 hours beforehand because, quote unquote, people from his past tried to extort Hardy for $800,000. Now, the people from his past are tied to the charges of domestic violence that he was accused of in 2014. The charges were eventually dropped. So we don't exactly know the extent in which the extortion or whatever the case is was trying to take place, what they were trying to do, if they said that they were going to bring up to light more evidence, or if somebody else was going to claim something, or what. We don't know exactly those details. Nonetheless, this did happen, and I feel like this needs to be talked about because with the UFC, with Dana White, they have to understand who they have in a fighter in Greg Hardy.
No, they absolutely do. And this is something, I don't know how much the UFC can really help him out, because this is a personal matter. He's got to either reach out for help or he's got to deal with it on his own. And with this situation, this is an incident that happened back in 2014, 6 years ago at this point, and he's having people now come after him because he's in the limelight. He's co-maining events. He's a big name in a new sport. He's a big name. People still recognize that name in the NFL. So they're trying to take advantage of him and take whatever money he has left over. And if we go back to the incident, I'm not going to harp on this too much, but if you read into it and you see the real details on it and get the court documents of what occurred, it is appalling that this man was dragged through the mud. Everything that was said about him and that was against him was completely false. No, was an innocent man, and I agree with him. Everything he said in that post-fight press conference was accurate. I went through all of the court documents, and I read through all of the statements. What happened was just him being screwed over by the system. This is just, just people taking advantage of him, and it not only cost him his NFL career, it not only cost him millions of dollars, but now it's affecting a new sport that he's fallen in love with, a sport that he is thriving in, and it's costing him opportunities here. And this is something that needs to be taken care of, and he needs to take care of it, not only himself, but if he needs help, reach out for it, because there are plenty of people out there that are going to be willing to help him in this situation.
For sure.
There's no reason that somebody should be reaching out to him 2 hours before a fight starts and trying to extort him for some money. Like that's just unbelievable that this is still happening. I just don't understand where people are coming from, where they think they get off thinking they can find get a quick buck by saying, "Oh, I have some details on you. If you don't want them to get out, pay me this money."
There's no explanation for the less decency side of humanity. I mean, the fact remains that people do this all the time. People have no morals, they have no values. With that being said, though, it's tough to try to ride, from a brand perspective, from the UFC's perspective. This guy has a checkered past, because the average fan, the average person who watches the UFC is not going to take the time that you took to go into the court documents, to go into everything and look into his past. All they know is that he was shunned from the NFL for domestic violence charges. And whether they prove to be innocent or not, it doesn't matter. He ended up here in the UFC. He's been fighting really well. And if his past continues to haunt him, I can't imagine that the UFC isn't taking note of that and saying, listen, we know it's not your fault, but we don't want our brand associated with these sorts of things. Either get your past under control.
That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen, because
we don't know that's not going to happen.
Look at John Jones. I mean, let's just take one guy into this. John Jones has done a litany of things throughout his career. And
right, but John Jones is arguably one of the greatest fighters of all time.
This is one of the things I love about Dana White. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. If you bring in money, if you make him money, he doesn't care. He'll stick up for you. He'll fight for you. He'll do what it takes to get you there on fight night. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you've done in your past. And that's what's so great about this sport. It does, like, you get a second opportunity in the UFC. And I think that's why Greg Hardy is so grateful for where he is, and not upset about not getting bigger opponents, and not getting paid more. I mean, this is a guy who went from the heights of being a Pro Bowl player in the NFL to then working at an LA Fitness because he needed money to make ends meet. Like that is unbelievable, to then pick himself up, go into the UFC, and I don't want to say dominate, but he has truly been impressive for a guy that 2 years ago just started fighting. He walked into a gym and started getting trained, and has come this far. Like, there's a lot of athletes out there, but most of them can't fight. And this is a guy who can fight. And I think through more training, give him time to get more experience, I think he will be able to be somebody in the heavyweight division. Now, I think that raises another issue with Greg Hardy, is his mismanagement of weight cuts. This is a guy who almost missed weight leading up to this fight. He had to get approval from the Nevada State Athletic Commission to work off some of the weight so he could make weight at the heavyweight in the heavyweight class. He was playing at 290 pounds in the NFL, and that's what he still walks around at. And as much as he says, each weight cut is better than the next, he's missing weight. It can't be that easy for him. He's either not taking it seriously enough, or it's too hard. That's something he's truly got to work on, and that's going to impede him moving forward when it comes to stamina. If he gets tougher opponents, and he will, it's going to be much harder for him to stand in there for 15 to 25 minutes and be a solid fighter.
Right. So, I mean, you've talked a lot about him getting, better fights or more competent fighters, and possibly going into the ranks of the heavyweight class. Do you think it's time that Greg Hardy receives a bout with a ranked opponent? And
Well,
if so, like how high does that rank go? Does it go
well,
to
no,
10?
yeah, that's exactly where it is. He's not going to get anything better than that. Alexander Volkov was the exception. He was a guy that's still on the rise, and making his way up in the heavyweight class, in the heavyweight ranks. But I think that was kind of reaching. I think Dana was reaching in that instance and thought Greg Hardy would be able to handle himself. And hey, he stuck in there for 15 minutes and went to decision, and he lost unanimously. But
Right.
Greg Hardy is getting better every time he fights. He's not going to fight now for another, 3-4 months, and he'll be better the next time we see him. But I think he's in his mid 30s. He's not getting any younger. If you're going to give him an opportunity to be something in this league and not just a journeyman, you've got to give him a ranked opponent now, and it's got to be somebody between top 10 and top 15. It's somebody in that range, and there's plenty of good guys that would be up for the challenge. I think that would really give him a good fight. I think
So
that's something.
give me two or three names that you could possibly see Greg Hardy go after, because I believe that he has the skill set and the um ability to beat these guys. I want to hear, who you think he best matches up with. Who would be a name that you would want to put on a UFC card, whether it's a co-main for a fight night, or if it's a main card for a pay-per-view.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably look at number 14 and 15 in the heavyweight division. I'll start with Marcin Tybura. I believe he is the training partner for Jan Blachowicz. I mean, you guys can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but Tybura has been pretty solid. He's a young guy. He's moving up. He'll be great in the heavyweight division. He has a bright future, and I think this is a great place. I think this is a great fight against Greg Hardy. These guys are going to go at it. They're very aggressive strikers, and I think that it'll be a good fight. And I think one thing that Greg Hardy is missing is he hasn't had somebody who's rung his bell, who's really taken it to him. And in order for some fighters to get to that next level in their career, they need to be dropped. They need to be uh, they need to be taken down. And so I think that's something that Greg Hardy's never been knocked out. He's never he's lost to a decision. He's lost to disqualifications. He's lost to an inhaler, even though that happened afterward. He ended up winning that fight.
Right.
He has not had somebody who's been able to take him out. And in order for him to improve, I think that he needs to be humbled, and that's through a knockout. So I think Marcin Tybura is definitely a guy who can do that. And then Blagoy Ivanov, a guy I really like, a guy I remember when he fought who is it? I'm forgetting his name, but in his last fight, he struggled a little bit, and I think same thing with Blagoy happened with Greg Hardy, in that he got an opponent that was too far above his caliber, and they were trying to move him up in the UFC way before he was ready. And Blagoy, yeah, he has previous experience fighting in other promotions and other forms of MMA, but I think that Blagoy has a lot of potential in the UFC, and he would be another great opponent for Greg Hardy.
Uh, I just looked it up. Blagoy's last fight was Tai Tuivasa.
Okay, it was Tai Tuivasa.
Yeah. Um, okay, those are some good names. I mean, those are some interesting names, because in my eyes, if he can fight one of these guys, and he can last the entire fight, and also show that, he can put up quite the fight, even if he doesn't win, whether it's by decision or whatever. I'd still like to see him move up and continue to progress within that division, because again, we're talking about a guy who only started fighting 2 years ago. And I mean, not for anything, but age is not on his side right now. I mean, he's working against the clock. So he's got to start moving faster and faster. Excuse me. But I think these two fights would definitely provide uh, a lot of context for where Greg Hardy can be. I think these will be definition fights, is what I like to call them. They're going to define whether he's going to be somebody that should be featured in this division, or if he's going to be that quote unquote journeyman, where he's just going to be the guy that, if you want to move up, you have to go through Greg Hardy and a couple of these other guys. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. But do you foresee Dana White actually going through with this in the next, I guess, 4 or 5 months?
Oh, I definitely do. I think Dana White is a smart guy. He knows the value that Greg Hardy brings, and he knows that Greg Hardy is getting progressively better. He's going to go back. He's going to learn from this fight with Maurice Green, and he is going to get better. Like, I think that you can only expect a guy who's been in a sport for 2 years, 2.5 years, to get better every day that he's in a gym. Like,
Right.
you got to think the NFL. Think about when, he was in Pee Wee football and he just learned how to tackle. Well, now he's going to learn to hit harder. Now he's going to learn techniques. He's going to learn swim moves and pass rush moves and all these things. Once you learn the basics, then you can dive into the nitty gritty and you can start to then learn more. He is a striker. He is that, and a lot of heavyweights are strikers. He's got to work on his ground game. He's got to work on so much that he is going to improve in each one of those areas. He's not going to be elite in any of them, but
Right.
he's going to improve a lot more than what he has shown so far.
Yeah, I mean, you start with the basics of not using an inhaler and not getting disqualified. That's where you start.
Well, you start by learning the rules of the sport.
Right. I feel like that should go without being said, but I feel like at this point we have to say it.